Hi, welcome back to my channel, Beautiful Minutia. If you're new here, my name is Tiffany, and today I'm talking about Goodreads. I actually did the opposite of this video last month, I think, so I'll link that if you want to check it out. Basically, what I'm doing today is I am going to be looking at, in my read section of Goodreads, what are the highest rated books on there, and pointing out some where I greatly differed. So I did the reverse where I took books that were very lowly rated, had like a low average rating on Goodreads, and then if I disagreed and had a really high rating. So this is exactly the opposite of that. And I have not looked at this, so I am like blind reacting to this with you. I haven't like formulated any thoughts. I don't know what's going to be up there. I don't know what's going to be the highest rated. For me, something that is highly rated on Goodreads for sure needs to have over a 4-star average rating. And this is the average rating of everyone who read it and rated it. So it's not just my thoughts or the thoughts of people that I know. It's like the overall rating. I think for something to be highly rated on Goodreads, it probably needs to be like 4.3, 4.4, 4.5, like somewhere in that range. Because I feel like for a book to be rated like straight up 4 stars across the board is not super unusual. But I think for like lowly rated books, it needed to be under 4 stars, especially if it was under like 3.7 or below. Like I think that was lower. So we'll see what we have here. I'm curious to see what my very highest rated book on here is. Okay, so the highest rated book on here that I have read is Words of Radiance by Brandon Sanderson, which has an average rating of 4.76 stars. That's incredible. That is almost a 5-star rating across the board. This is book 2 in the Stormlight Archive. I did give it 5 stars. I really enjoyed most of the Stormlight Archive books. I'm actually kind of nervous because I feel like one of them that I didn't like is probably going to be in this video, but we'll find out. Anyways, I think it's kind of common for the first book in a series to be the lowest rated of the series, because those are people who are trying the series for the first time, and then subsequent books are often more highly rated because the people who are reading them are people who enjoyed book 1 and want to continue on with the series. So I'm not surprised that Words of Radiance is the highest rated on here. It is book 2, like I said, but for a lot of people, this is actually their favorite in the Stormlight Archive. I have an unpopular opinion in that Oathbringer is actually my favorite, but I did really enjoy Words of Radiance. Okay, I'm not surprised this one is on here. The Women by Kristen Hanna has an average rating of 4.59 stars. I have heard almost nothing but fantastic things about this book. I read it with my in-person book club in March and very much disliked it. I think I gave it 3 stars because I could see the historical merit of the book in that this is written about the women who served in Vietnam, which is something that's not really talked about. In fact, I found out from this book that there was a narrative going on through the media in the United States and through the government that there weren't even really women in Vietnam at all. And so it's really interesting, that aspect of the book. You know, we have a young girl who decides that she is going to be a nurse during the Vietnam War, and so she goes over there. First half of the book details her experiences over there, some of the atrocities that she sees, some of the things that happen to like the soldiers, some of the things that happen to the civilians, and how she kind of sees the worst of the worst as a nurse. Then the second half of the book details her coming back to the United States, how she's treated as a veteran by her friends, by her family, by the public at large. And so there were elements of this book that I felt were really well done, but I did really dislike it for a number of reasons. Some of those reasons are extremely spoilery, so I cannot tell you those reasons, but I did feel like there were a number of choices that Kristen Hanna made that felt like absolute cop-outs, and she kept doing those things in the story. And so as a result, the book felt very repetitive, as well as some of her writing choices were a little bit repetitive. And I really hated all of the love story elements of this story. I felt like were 1000% atrocious and like oftentimes like romanticizing adultery. I've since talked to some people who have spouses who are in the military, and I guess that is like a very prevalent thing in the military. Infidelity is very, very common, and I didn't really know that, and so maybe that's accurate, but it's still made for an unenjoyable reading experience. I also felt like our main character had like the most bland personality ever, and so I really didn't care about her or care what happened to her. I found her to be entirely forgettable. That's a hot take though. Lots of people love it. Was many people's favorite book of the year last year. And so I was really excited to read it, but I've read 2 Kristen Hanna books this year and extremely disliked both of them. And it made me realize that I think Enjoying the Nightingale by Kristen Hanna was a one-off, because I haven't liked anything else I've read by her. Okay, I'm noticing a trend on some manga volumes that I've read. So I'm just going to share the series as a whole and not the volumes, because I've had mixed experiences with different volumes of these manga series. So the first series is Attack on Titan, which I am currently reading with Christy, and we're kind of reading like a volume a month ish. And so I have some volumes that are rated here at 4.5, 4.6 stars that I rated 3 stars, because when you have a manga series that is over 30 volumes long, it feels dragged out at times. There are times where I feel like an entire volume was just filler and set up for the next volume. And yeah, so I don't know. That's an unpopular opinion, probably, according to these Goodreads ratings anyway. The other one is The Apothecary Diaries, which I have only read the first 2 volumes of. And the one that I'm seeing right here that's coming up first is volume 2, which has an average rating of 4.52 stars on Goodreads, and I gave it 3 stars. I felt like it was fine. I think I liked the first one a little bit better than volume 2, but volume 2, I just like never think of this manga series, and I didn't find it to be like overly enjoyable. I found aspects of it to be funny, because it's about this girl who ends up becoming kind of like a lady's maid to one of the emperor's consorts, and she is uncovering some things. She used to be an apothecary, so she actually saves someone's life in the first volume because she detects poison in something. And so that's kind of where we are in the story and what's the basic premise of what's happening, but I didn't enjoy it enough to continue on. Okay, this is a very hot take. The War That Saved My Life by Kimberly Brubaker Bradley has a 4.49 star rating on Goodreads, and I gave it 3 stars. I read it a while ago, 5 years ago. So, okay, I had a couple of issues with this book. One is that it is a middle grade book. It's a World War II historical fiction middle grade book. And when I read this book, my daughter was on the younger end of middle grade, and I remember thinking, like, this is so intense with the child abuse that is depicted in the first part of this book, because there's this girl who basically is crippled and has like issues with her legs, and her mother just abuses her physically, mentally, emotionally. And then the bombing starts happening in London, and so the children are evacuated to the countryside, and she is taken in by someone who is far kinder to her than her mother is, and kind of tries to help her heal some of the trauma that she's experienced at the hand of her mother. But it felt like one of those things where at the time I had an 8-year-old, and I was like, this is a lot. And I think that's the issue with middle grade, is that it spans, I think 3rd grade through 6th grade, and what a 6th grader can handle is very, very different than what a 3rd grader can handle. So I think that that was part of it. I also very distinctly remember feeling like there were things that were super unrealistic. So the person who's helping this young girl immediately knows how to handle her trauma outbursts in the way that she behaves in a time period where that would not really have been normal. She had no background. She had never had any children of her own. I don't think she was even like a teacher or anything. Maybe I'm misremembering that, but she didn't really have experience, and yet she knew perfectly how to handle that. And then there's things like, the young girl who can't even walk and has never seen a horse before and is scared of horses, and within 5 seconds is riding a horse perfectly. And so there were things about it that felt really unrealistic, and I remember not really liking the writing style either. So the traumatic elements, I think, were probably a me issue at the time, in that it's like, okay, I might view that differently now that my child is older. But I do feel like with middle grade, I feel like it would be helpful to break the categories down even further, to have like a middle school, because I feel like this is perfect for middle school, like 6th through 8th grade, maybe even like 5th through 8th grade. But like for a 3rd grader, it felt a little intense. Oh, Oh, this is not going to be a popular opinion. I guess none of them are if I'm rating far against what the trend is. So, The Winter of the Witch by Catherine Arden has a 4.49 average star rating out of like 87,000 reviews and ratings. So I gave it 2 stars, which is so low. I read the first book in this series, The Bear and the Nightingale, and loved it. It's like so slow burn, so atmospheric, takes place in Russia, combines some really interesting elements of like Russian folklore and mythology, and I really liked it. I remember feeling book two might end up on this. I don't know. Book two, I felt like was like in a totally different place. We're no longer in the countryside. We're now in St. Petersburg. And it felt like a typical YA book. And so, and like really fast paced as opposed to the first book. And so I remember feeling like, oh, that's kind of a bummer. Now this feels like everything else, but I wanted to know how the series ends. So I picked up book 3. I'm looking over my review on Goodreads because I read this like, I don't know, like 5 years ago. And I had a lot of things to say that were really spoilery. So I can't share most of those thoughts here, but I was very discontent with this book in general. I liked the first like half of the book because we're heading back to the mythology roots, which were almost completely abandoned in book 2. And so there's this quest then journey that she is going on at the beginning of the book that really brought us back to those mythology roots that I was missing from book 1. But then, you know, we go back to the city and there's some repetitive writing that I really didn't like. And then I felt like the book had a good ending place at about 60% of the way through the book, but then it didn't end there. We just kept going, and then it had just like a really weird ending and had some really kind of odd statements I felt like the series as a whole was making about Christianity versus old gods, like new religion versus old religion. So I felt like extremely dissatisfied with this series as a whole. I wish all 3 books could have been like book 1. I'm seeing a theme here. There's a lot of middle grade in here that I've given like 2 or 3 stars to that have a higher rating overall. So the next one on here is also a book 2 in a series, which is another thing I'm seeing here. And that is Wondersmith, The Calling of Morrigan Crow by Jessica Townsend. This is Nevermore book 2, and it has a 4.47 overall average rating on Goodreads. I gave it 3 stars because I really liked the first book, and the second book I was enjoying because it has a school setting that is very similar feeling to Harry Potter. That's really fun, and I love a magical school setting. I know some people actually did take issue with the fact that, you know, a lot of magical school settings feel like a ripoff of Harry Potter, and this did in a lot of ways, so it wasn't very original, but there were some darker elements in this book that felt like it went too far for middle grade. There's like a really creepy seance scene in here that is like really weird. And then also there's like a main theme of like human trafficking on the black market in this book, which also felt like a really strange choice for a middle grade book. Okay, so the next one is one that I feel like maybe I would have a higher rating if I was to reread it, but I was kind of disappointed with it when I read it. So They Called Us Enemy, which is a graphic novel by George Takei. Some other people illustrated it, but it's basically his story of being in a Japanese internment camp as a child. And I gave it 2 stars, which I feel like in hindsight feels quite harsh. But I had a couple of reasons for it. One of them being that I felt like the format was really weird. So we start with George Takei essentially giving this TED talk about his life, like on a stage talking about his time in a Japanese internment camp. And then like the images continually flash back to him in the internment camp, but then we flash forward to him talking on this stage to this audience, which I was like, this feels so weird and disjointed to have made that choice. But the other thing that I struggled with, and now I'm like realizing like, okay, there's validity to this. I feel like he represents his time in the Japanese internment camps as fairly sunny. And he talks about how children tend to see things through more rose-colored glasses than adults do, and kind of make the best of situations. And so maybe that was his intention in this, and how he really felt about his childhood. But it's odd to read a book about something that so few Americans knew about for a while, and it be represented so positively. Like, I mean, it's not positive that he had to leave his home and live in this Japanese internment camp, but a lot of what he talks about is how fun his childhood was and how his parents made it as good for him as they could have. And so it just felt odd to be reading about something that was so tragic and so horrible, but the book to feel positive. And I'm wondering if I would feel that way if I reread it, but I don't know. It's one of those ones where I feel like I would probably rate that more highly. I knew Wind and Truth was going to be on here. 4.38 average star rating on Goodreads. I feel like, did I give this 3 stars on Goodreads? I did. That was really nice of me because on Storygraph, I gave it 2.5. I cannot even express to you how disappointing this book was to have spent all the time of the first 4 books, thousands and thousands of pages to get to this was horrifically disappointing. This book was beyond bloated. Like, it is like 1,400 pages long. And at the end, I went, for what? Like, I really didn't like this book. I felt like a lot of our characters, if they went through any kind of arc at all, it was like revisiting things that we'd already resolved in previous books, but also they felt like they weren't really having any character growth. It felt like everyone was just a cardboard cutout that Sanderson was moving from place to place to drive the plot, and we don't even get a conclusive ending. And I knew that, like, this is an end of an arc, not the end of an era, so I knew that the next 5 books take place not long after this book ends. But when we're going to have to be waiting over 10 years for the next book, we could have had a little bit more resolution than we had in this book. But there were very few things about this book that I liked. I like Zeth's backstory, and that was just about it. Like, there was a couple of plot points that I thought were interesting. There was some exploration things of the world building that I thought was interesting, but overall, I felt like this book was a massive waste of time. So actually, 3 stars is an incredibly generous rating. That's what I would rate lower than what I initially rated it. I've got a couple of Christian fiction books on here, which I'm not really surprised about. One is book 3 in a series, and it's If I Live by Terry Blackstock, which has an overall average rating of 4.37 stars. And I gave it 3 stars, I guess, but I feel like it was felt like more like a 2 star. I think that book 2 I gave 2 stars too. So I flew through book 1, and I don't even remember fully the premise of this book because I read it over 5 years ago. So it's this girl who gets like set up for this murder or whatever, and she's convinced that like she's going to be arrested, so she goes on the run and she has different disguises and all that kind of stuff. So the first book didn't have a lot of character development. It was very plot heavy of her running, but I thought that it was fun, so I still enjoyed it, thinking we're going to get more like character development in book 2 and 3, and we absolutely don't. I feel like I didn't have like a close connection to any of the characters, and I really hated how this book resolved like the romance aspect of it. Not in the sense that certain people end up together, but the way that the romance was written was very cringy to me, especially considering these people don't even like know each other that well. So it was an experience, I guess. A lot of people love this series, but I couldn't deal with it. Another book that I only read the first book in the series, I did not continue on, is When the Day Comes by Gabrielle Meyer, which has an overall rating of 4.36 stars. And I think I gave it 3 stars. Again, like, I don't really have 3-star feelings for this book. I have 2-star feelings. I think I was trying to be kind because a lot of people love this book so much. I think I was impressed by the fact that the prose was actually decent, because a lot of Christian fiction that I tried to read in recent days has horrific prose. Like, it's so bad. Like, authors that just churn out 1,000 books and like their writing is not even good. And so I felt like the writing was decent, but I am just not really a historical fiction girly. I want to dive more into Christian fantasy because I feel like I like fantasy more than contemporary or thriller or romance or historical fiction, and I feel like most Christian fiction tends to be one of those 4 things. So I think that that's part of the issue. It was a me issue. But I never invested in the romance in this. I found there were some really traumatic things that happened to our main character that were just absolutely glossed over, that I thought was like, why is everything fine all of a sudden with this? It was really odd the way that certain things were handled, and I think it's because Christian fiction often feels like they have to be a bit more sanitized with how they explore things, and I feel like you can explore trauma and horrific things without being gratuitous in your content. And so I think that that is a mistake a lot of Christian fiction authors tend to gravitate towards, is that they try to clean it up so it won't be offensive to anyone, but then it ends up feeling like it doesn't have any depth to it, and that's kind of how I felt about this book. Oh, this is a popular book. Remarkably Bright Creatures by Shelby Van Pelt has an overall average star rating of 4.36 stars, and I gave it 3 stars, but that's okay. I feel like I probably have more of a 2-star feeling for it over time. I felt like it was really mediocre. So this is a story of an older woman who's working at an aquarium, and she kind of has a connection to this octopus there as she is cleaning this aquarium at night. I love the octopus's perspective. It's great. It's the best part of this book. I didn't care about anyone else. I thought like the older lady was like so cold and reserved that I couldn't get attached to her. And I felt like it was supposed to feel really emotional, and it didn't. And when you read the description of the book, there's a whole nother character whose perspective we get very frequently, who is not even mentioned in the inside flap or on the back or, whatever. And he is so annoying. And I felt like he didn't have any real character growth over time. I feel like he just was like, oh, I guess I should act better than I do. And I just thought he was the worst, and he kind of ruined the book for me. I think otherwise maybe I would have liked it a little bit more, but I just didn't have the emotional connection. Well, I think I'm going to stop this video here. It's interesting to see what books I had differing opinions on. It was also very interesting because I think a lot of these books are books that I read like 4 or 5 years ago, towards the beginning of my journey on BookTube. I've had my channel for almost 5 years now, but I started watching BookTube about 6 months before I started my channel. And so as a result, I was finding all these books and adding them to my TBR and hearing people talk about them, and then not really connecting with them the same way other people did who were recommending them to me. So I think since I have started BookTube, I have cemented my taste a bit more, and am less likely to read a book just because people are talking about it than I was before. So it's really interesting, the journey of what's happened there, because there weren't quite as many books that have been recent. I mean, there's a couple this year, but overall, a lot of these books are further in the past. So these are some of my unpopular bookish opinions, I guess, according to Goodreads. I'd love to hear from you in the comments down below. If you've read any of these books, you might have totally different thoughts than me, because a lot of people did. Most people did. But are there any books that everyone seems to love, but you really didn't? I would love to hear if you have any of those books as well, so we can have some solidarity in the comments together. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, please hit like and also subscribe so you can continue to see more bookish content from me, and I will see you again next time.